I'm Senator Ron Wyden, and with me is Senator Tammy Baldwin, and we want to welcome all of you to the Google Hangout for wonderful craft beverages that are made in America. And first, I want to thank Senator Baldwin. She is a co-sponsor of our bill for her commitment to championing this important piece of legislation that is so vital to craft brewers and cider makers, distillers, and vintners in Oregon, Wisconsin, and across the country. And Senator Baldwin and I have the pleasure to be joined today with two terrific craft brewers, Gary Fish, owner of Deschutes Brewery in Bend, Oregon, and Jeff Hamilton, president of Sprecher Brewing Company in Glendale, Wisconsin. Now, what Senator Baldwin and I want to accomplish today is to make sure that we can raise awareness for the need to remove the many obstacles, especially in our tax and regulatory codes, that craft beverage makers like Deschutes and Sprecher are now unnecessarily facing. And as you're watching, we hope that you'll follow along and tweet us with your questions using hashtag #CraftBeverageHangout. Now, I'm just going to make a couple of quick remarks and then hand it over to Senator Baldwin and Gary and Jeff. In our home state, it's Oregon Craft Beer Month. So if you're in Oregon, check out a craft brewer near you. I'll tweet a link to a map of all our wonderful state breweries. Oregon is home, and of course this is a completely unbiased opinion, the best breweries in the world. And we're also home to world-class cider makers, wineries, and distilleries. And I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to tell you why our bill is so important to Oregon, Wisconsin, and craft beverage makers around the country. First of all are the extraordinary economic benefits. In Oregon alone, craft beverage makers contribute $6 billion and 40,000 jobs to Oregon's economy. That is not exactly small potatoes, or as we might say, hops, by any account. Nationally, the numbers are even more eye-popping. In 2012, the last year we have national data for, the craft beverage industry alone contributed $40 billion to the U.S. economy, along with 360,000 jobs. And we know that those numbers are going to skyrocket, especially with our legislation. So my state's role as a national player in the craft beverage market means that this is a profession, this is a business that's bringing money into the state. And I'll wrap up by making sure that people understand the three major features of what Senator Baldwin and I are trying to address in our bill. First, the two of us want to secure tax relief for the small producers of beer, wine, cider, and spirits, because we know what these small businesses are going to do is they are going to plow that tax relief. These are awfully small businesses. They're going to plow that relief right back into investing in businesses in Oregon, Wisconsin, and around the country. Second, our legislation rolls back outdated alcohol regulations. And some of these regulations ought to be pretty much in a museum because they date back to Prohibition. For example, our bill allows the smallest producers to file their taxes quarterly rather than every 2 weeks. And it modernizes the rules to allow greater collaboration between brewers. And the third important part of our legislation is we streamline the administration of how alcohol programs are run. For example, right now, the government, as astounding as it sounds, has to approve every single beer ingredient. There are a handful of limited exceptions, but our bill would say that if the ingredient is a wholesome fruit, vegetable, or spice, and it's safe to put in a beer, it shouldn't need to go through some sort of time-consuming and unnecessary pre-approval process. So at this point, I want to turn it over to my colleague, Senator Baldwin and Gary and Jeff, and they're going to have some remarks as well, and then we're going to make sure that everybody who's following this is going to have a chance to weigh in as well. But Senator Baldwin, it's terrific to team up with you. Oregon and Wisconsin have so much in common, and why don't you just proceed as you would choose to.
Well, thank you, Senator Wyden. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you and all of the attendees in this Google Hangout to celebrate craft brewing and beer brewing in general, and to talk about the type of changes that our legislation would bring about. I just want to start by bragging on Wisconsin, giving a little opportunity. You know, we are actually known for beer, for brats, for cheese, and we're known throughout the nation and world for those products because we produce them well, and a lot of it. We're good at what we do, and in the state, in recent years, actually over a couple of decades now, we've seen a flourishing craft brewing industry. We now have over 100 small craft brewers in the state, including, and you're going to hear from Jeff later, but including Sprecher Brewery, which is one of our pride and joy in Wisconsin. We also have some of the larger iconic brewers that many are familiar with: Miller Coors, PBR, Schlitz, Old Style, and Leinenkugels among them. So we have a real variety in the state, but our craftsmanship is something that we're known for, and we're very proud of it. As I've seen the craft brewing industry sort of grow in the state of Wisconsin, and certainly nationally also, it's been very interesting to get to know and have conversations with the craft brewers who are starting businesses and communities across the state. And there's some things that I hear over and over again as I visit and tour and listen. One of the things is that if we were to alleviate the excise tax, small brewers would immediately invest back in their businesses. For some, this means hiring additional staff, because I can tell you, I haven't talked to a one who doesn't tell me that the demand for their product outpaces their ability to produce. And so they're all looking at opportunities to bring on more staff, perhaps invest in additional equipment. And all of these purchases, all of this hiring or increasing wages obviously ripples through the Wisconsin economy. A brewer that I was talking to recently in traveling the state of Wisconsin said that he had done a back-of-the-envelope calculation that if this reduction in excise taxes for his brewery were to go in effect, he believed that he would actually produce more tax revenue because of the hiring that he would do and how that would filter through the economy. So this is just a win-win. I also just have to say that so many of the entrepreneurs that I've met who are starting or have started over time are doing such great things for our economy in other ways, like rehabilitating old buildings, perhaps in areas of communities that have become run down, and bringing new life and new commerce to communities across Wisconsin. So it's a joy, and we want to pull out any roadblocks to delighted to be part of this effort. I thank Senator Wyden for his leadership. It really is a measure that is bringing so many together, and I'm just pleased to be a part of that effort.
Well, Senator Baldwin, well said, and I think it's particularly helpful to people who are tuning in to hear you lay out what an extraordinary economic multiplier there is in this industry. You know, you're talking about more jobs, reinvesting capital, working to rehabilitate buildings. It's so important to hear these direct stories from small businesses and entrepreneurs and see how you've been going to bat for them. So it's wonderful to be able to partner with you. Let's get our talented businesses and our business owners into this. Gary Fish and Jeff Hamilton. Gary, why don't you start, and then we'll, like we say in the Senate, we'll yield the time to Jeff to wrap up the prepared remarks. Gary, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Senator. It's great to be here, and I want to thank you, Senator Baldwin, and others who have worked so diligently to really create some very common sense reform. And you know, we operate in Oregon, and Oregon has the honor of leading the nation in terms of craft beer production. I think a full 20% of the beer consumed in Oregon is now produced by Oregon craft breweries, and so that's a benchmark that every other state can aspire to. And these are businesses that are small entrepreneurial businesses that contribute in very meaningful ways to their communities. They employ a lot of people. As I've liked to say in the past, we are small businesses, and therefore we are somewhat blissfully inefficient. It takes more people to produce the beer that we produce, and therefore it's good for communities all across our great state and country. I want to talk just a little bit for the listeners about excise taxes and kind of explain a little bit what they are. Excise taxes are taxes that we pay on our production that are after or in addition to every other tax that every other small business pays. We pay the same payroll tax, income tax if we have it, we pay property taxes, we pay all those kinds of things that every other business does, and then we get to pay excise taxes based on simply on our production. It has nothing to do with whether or not the business employs more people or earns more money or anything like that. It simply is a production-based tax. So this, one of the features of this legislation is that it relieves a percentage of that tax burden, freeing up capital for these small entrepreneurial businesses to continue to grow. The numbers, and they're still being generated, I know, on this most recent legislation, but the numbers are very, very positive in terms of the number of jobs that will be created and what the benefit will be financially for those jobs. But in addition, you know, the common sense regulation, you mentioned it, Senator, earlier in your remarks, that a small bootstrapping business wouldn't have to pay taxes but quarterly. If you asked any small business in any other industry in this nation, if they had to file their taxes every 2 weeks, what would it do to them in terms of cost, hassle, taking them away from actually running their businesses and driving their businesses to greater heights? I think they'd be appalled to see that these small businesses had to do this. So these are some very, very common sense things that we can do to really capitalize on it. Another thing is, you know, craft beer is healthy across the country and in Oregon, and that's something we're very proud of. And this isn't a reward for that health. This is an incentive to continue to drive this industry to greater heights, to get these businesses to invest more money back into their businesses, to hire more people, to buy more equipment, more raw materials, and so forth. So really, this is something that the cost is nominal, the benefit is substantial, and again, I think that this is just something that has long been needed, and we're very, very proud to be able to sit here today utilizing this technology to help spread the word. And thank you again to you and to Senator Baldwin for making this opportunity available. And now, because I've known him for a long time and we've been friends for a long time, I will yield to the brewer from Wisconsin.
Wonderful. Jeff, let's hear what's going on in Wisconsin.
Well, thank you, Senator Wyden. First of all, I really do appreciate the chance to be here and be on a program like this with Gary, who I had the great honor of coming to the craft beer conference in Portland this year. And I would have to say that any state would be somewhat jealous of the craft beer environment and just the vigor that you see, particularly in Portland, but I'm sure in the whole state. So cheers to you guys on that.
Hey, well said.
I also want to say that Wisconsin, on the other hand, is got a really long and rich tradition in brewing, and I've been fortunate enough to be involved with the Wisconsin Brewers Guild for nearly 10 years, and we have members that go back into the 1800s, and we have some new members that have just started this year. So we really have a very vast and wide beer industry here, and I want to say that the other reason that this is very important right now for Wisconsin is we have a lot of service industries and other manufacturing industries that serve the beer business. And as this large amount of entrepreneurial spirit has kicked in here, most small guys try to start out by finding somebody else's equipment, and soon they'll find that they've outgrown that, or now with so many people getting in the brewing business, there's actually lack of equipment. So here in Wisconsin, we are very rich with tank makers, with people that make canning equipment. We have glass makers here in the state. We also have one of the three remaining aluminum can manufacturers is also located here in Wisconsin. We do grow some barley here. We are bringing hops back, and of course, there's no better water for making beer than Lake Michigan water. So I think everybody knows that. So a little cheerleading for the state of Wisconsin. I also want to talk about this bill because it brings together, I think, an entrepreneurial spirit across craft beverages. And that's another thing we do here in Wisconsin. We do have a lot of wineries. Many of them make cider. We have many breweries who now have delved into cider. And some of our breweries, as have happened in Oregon, are now delving into craft spirits. Because, in essence, if you're going to make craft spirits, you have to start out with something that looks a lot like beer. So I believe that this package, because it ties some of these together and it gives money directly to entrepreneurs, will bring some of these things together, and people that are in brewing will invest in cider. People that are in cider will invest in brewing or spirits. So I do see that this bill is the first attempt to really bring and recognize artisan beverages across the U.S. And I want to also thank the Senator for mentioning our root beer, because we see that as another artisan beverage that many brewers are also starting to make, craft types of non-alcoholic drinks. So the type of people that run these organizations are creative, and they're not going to stop with this. So this money flows directly back to where it needs to go.
In the last few minutes of the Hangout, I thought it'd be great if we spent just a few minutes talking about some of the questions that people have been sending us, and in particular, Senator Baldwin and I might start off with one. People are saying, why do you think our bill has a good chance of passing? First of all, I think that we've seen a wonderful grassroots movement develop with those in the craft beverage industry. Senator Baldwin and I were very involved in the effort to make sure that when you make the craft beverages and you produce this spent grain, it's a healthy source of protein for animals. The animals have had it for years and years, so the brewers give it to the farmers give it to the animals. Everybody is happy. The farmers love this healthy source of protein. What happened last year was the federal government decided to try to get in the middle of this and sort of make a mess out of regulations. And Senator Baldwin and I and colleagues stepped in, and I remember at one big meeting I got up and said, look, I may not know everything about beer, but I know when a federal agency has had one too many. And that, I think, helped us bring about the changes. And Senator Baldwin and I realized that the Congress has got a lot on its plate right now, but we are going to work hard to make sure that we get this bill passed. The Finance Committee, on which I serve, has already approved 2 of the provisions in the bill, the Cider Act and the Craft Beverage Bond Simplification Act. This is another unnecessary set of bureaucratic hassles. We've got a big group in the House, Rep. Paulson, along with 41 sponsors. Rep. DeFazio and Blumenauer introduced a identical companion bill, and I think we're going to be able to build in both the Senate and the House bipartisan support for the bill. And I think it would be great if Senator Baldwin took this question and get the 2 of our representatives from industry to wrap up talking about why this is important to them in building a grassroots movement to get it passed. Senator Baldwin?
Well, I'm going to build on what Jeff was saying and what I was saying earlier about the growth of the industry. But Jeff raised such a critical point about the related manufacturing and agriculture that goes on around Wisconsin that interacts on a daily basis with the craft brewing and the larger iconic brewers in the state of Wisconsin. So that's a coalition waiting to act together. It's not just, as you mentioned, about the craft brewers themselves, but those who manufacture the bottles and the cans, and those who provide the inputs. These are industries that are gaining ground in our states. And Jeff was talking about how hops is sort of coming back in Wisconsin. I know it's already taken root in Oregon, because a lot of our craft brewers say that's where they get their hops. But these are communities that can work together to advance this legislation. The other thing I would say as well, we have the honor, Senator Wyden and I, to represent some of the best-known states with regard to craft brewing. Craft breweries are popping up all over the United States. And so I think our colleagues in the Senate, I think our colleagues in the House of Representatives ought to be paying attention to this incredible job creation engine that we're seeing and that we've seen a decade or so. Take notice of it and see what we can do to get rid of any impediments to their continued growth and health.
I think that's exactly wrap up, as Senator Baldwin is really talking about the extraordinary growth potential for these businesses. And why don't we wrap up by, Gary, you and Jeff talking about how you see the growth potential for your states.
Well, I'll start, Senator. I think just this morning it announced that craft beer is growing 16% so far this year. That's after several years of similar growth. So it's a very healthy thing, and I think this bill recognizes the value of American agriculturally tied manufacturing. So I think that's something that we feel very positive about, and I think that we are we recognize that that has value both in communities large and small, and that small manufacturing is exactly what this country needs right now.
16% is a big number. Jeff, how do you see the growth potential?
Well, I think that we will see very close type of numbers in both craft beer and Wisconsin. We're starting in Oregon. As a brewing also brew a lot of domestic light beer here. So, we have a lot of jobs to that. So from a smaller base, Oregon craft. So I would see the 16% growth across brewers, while our big flat.
So we ought to end on a fun note. When the University of Oregon Ducks beat the Badgers in the 2012 Rose Bowl, what beverage did the Duck fans celebrate with, and what beverage did Wisconsin fans drown their sorrows in? Just one quick kind of take from both of you for some fun.
Well, I'll tell you, I think Oregon with Mirror Pond Pale Ale, and Wisconsin not much to celebrate. Probably Sprecher root beer.
The root beer is pretty terrific. I know that. Jeff, last word for you.
Well, I'm afraid that they weren't much of a celebratory mood, so they probably did drink some root beer rather than the celebratory. I would have to say that Ground's that beer would be the Spotted Cow, Polaris Brewing, a great brewery that only brews in Wisconsin, and you know the Spotted Cow. Well, I got a hats on the carries and the foot.
Well said. Thanks everybody for the hangout. Last word for you, Senator Baldwin.
Well, I just wanted to reflect on losing the streak between Wisconsin and Oregon. Keep that in mind.
Now you're seeing why Senator Baldwin's such a great legislator. Thanks, everybody. We'll do it again.
Thank you all.
Cheers.